Ladies and gentlemen, let me please welcome to you the star of HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. Please welcome Bill Maher, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, well, I think you know we started a campaign at the beginning of the year to find one congressman we wanted to flip because we don't think Congress is representative necessarily of the people. And it's yours. Of the whole country, it wound up being yours, Mr. John Kline. We have nothing personal against him. I just don't think he represents this district of Minnesota. And I'm just going to go through his voting record, and then we can decide if that's true or not. And here to help me do that is our panel. Let me introduce them. Oh, that's John, right? He is the executive director of Minnesota's Jobs Coalition, my old job, John Rouleau. She's a columnist for townhall.com. Her new book is Let Me Be Clear, Barack Obama's War on Millennials, and One Woman's Case for Hope, which is available right down the road, I think, at Monkey See, Monkey Read. Is that right? Okay, Katie Kieffer, ladies and gentlemen. And he is the executive director of the Minnesota... Oh, no, that's him. He is the former Speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives, who is now professor of the University of Minnesota, Steve Sviggum. Steve, thank you for being here. And now for the blue team. And now your hometown Minnesota Timberwolves. All right, he is the journalist and author whose latest book, The Divide, will be out in paperback on October 23rd, the same day he launches his new online magazine called Racket. Matt Taibbi is right there. She's the Minneapolis resident who writes for the Daily Beast, Anna Marie Cox. Hi, Anna Marie. And the mayor of Minneapolis, Betsy Hodges. Okay. All right. As I said, I just want to go through the record of Mr. John Kline and find out if he really represents this district, because John Kline votes with the Republicans 98% of the time. That's pretty much as high as we could find of anybody. And I don't know that Minnesota has joined the Confederacy, because that's very, very high. He never says anything crazy, but he votes exactly like crazy people like Michelle Bachmann, Louis Gohmert. So I want to divide this into four categories of voting. We're going to talk about the environment, we're going to talk about women, we're going to talk about students and workers. So workers, women, students, and let's call them breathers. Let's start with workers. Mr. Kline has voted to get rid of the estate tax many times. This is something he's obsessed with, to reduce the inheritance tax for billionaires to zero. He wants to get rid of the income tax and replace it with a 30% sales tax. You can imagine how that would go down with poor people. Voted against extending unemployment benefits, against the minimum wage, against food stamps, against the DREAM Act, against any mine safety regulation. Does that represent Minnesota's second? No! Panel? Yes. It does? This district went for Obama last time. It was almost even, but it doesn't seem to me that it's that conservative. It seems more moderate. Why does this record reflect Minnesota's second?
Well, Mr. Maher, it doesn't represent Los Angeles and Hollywood, where you're from. Ooh. But it does represent the second district. Second district, Randolph, Hastings, Lakeville, Cannon Falls, Kenyon. Those are the towns in the second district, and his voting record does represent that because he wants to balance the budget.
We could make a distinction between representing maybe what voters think their ideological affiliation is and voting in the actual needs of the voters in the district. Like this is not an especially poor district, but it's not an especially rich district either. There aren't a lot of people that are going to be benefiting from the income, from the getting rid of the estate tax. There aren't a lot of people that are going to benefit from the policies that he's putting forward. There are people who might, and this is a little bit of...
And there probably are a lot of
that
people who would
doesn't make
suffer
it,
from the
increasing
the
exactly.
Mayor, that doesn't make it right or wrong.
For those same voters.
What?
The downside for those same voters is significant.
Yeah.
As a millennial, I would counter that and say that you mentioned, Bill, that he opposed raising the minimum wage. Well, that actually does hurt teenagers. There's been a congressional review over the course of 50 years that found that every time the minimum wage was raised, it hurt teenagers because employers are unwilling to pay young people who have no skills and no experience that higher wage. And I know firsthand that if you have a job when you're starting out in 8th grade and then continue on, that's going to help you pay for college.
Well, if you had a job in 8th grade, I'm very sorry.
If you think you can pay for college with minimum wage in 8th grade, I don't know what college.
College with your 8th grade minimum wage, you could go to a for-profit college.
I went to the University of St. Thomas, a very expensive school right here in St. Paul, and
I
I worked 2 or 3 jobs, and in addition to academic scholarships, I was able to save up. But the average young person today won't have that benefit, is what I'm concerned about if we raise the minimum wage, because they won't be able to get those jobs to augment.
So you're conflating two different...
on whose studies you believe about the minimum wage. Everybody has their own studies about this, and the University of Chicago says that by a 4-to-1 margin that most people who are analyzing this topic believe that when you raise the minimum wage, it has no effect on employment whatsoever.
And also, if I may say, it used to be the case that the McDonald's worker was a teenager. Now the average age of the McDonald's worker is 29. Yeah. Okay, these are people with families trying to live on the minimum wage.
And that is the sad fact about the jobs that we're talking about. Increasingly, we have to make sure that these jobs can even begin to afford a life for a family. I mean, just raising the floor on poverty is what
Steve Jobs.
The minimum wage
Yeah,
can do.
that's a good point. But Steve Jobs, you mentioned that these people are older. We don't want 29-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds working at McDonald's. Steve Jobs was a Democrat, and he's told Obama, if you want to create jobs, you should cut taxes and cut regulations and bring talent into this country outside of the politically correct framework of the DREAM Act. And so I'm saying, let's look to Steve Jobs, a Democrat, and do that to create better jobs for older people.
I am all for looking to Steve Jobs. May he rest in peace. But also, I think that I do think you're conflating two issues when you talk about the need to save money as a minimum wage working teenager and the need for college. There's college affordability, which is a major problem, and then there's trying to pay for college with minimum wage, which you shouldn't try to have to do. The minimum wage and the minimum wage, I think what we're saying, and I think some people in the audience are saying, is that raising the minimum wage is not about helping young people, unfortunately. It's about usually helping those young people's parents.
If they can't get a job in the first place.
Touching base on that, I think that it's good that you bring up that average age of minimum wage is there, because it's been really disappointing that over the last 6 years, what we've seen is that the jobs that have come back that were lost in the recession, particularly here in Minnesota, pay an average of $3,000 less per year than the jobs that were lost in the recession. So we need to take a look at how we can get our economy jump-started again and get folks into those jobs that pay an honest wage for an honest day's work. We need to work on getting people up and lifting them out of poverty rather than focusing on these entry-level jobs.
But all the gains from the ending the recession and coming back have gone to the top 10%. The bottom 90% has lost. This is the first time this ever happened.
Mr. Maher, to be fair, you would also have to mention that Congressman Kline has worked in a bipartisan effort with the Senate Democrats on workforce development issues, workforce development programs. Very, very strong work. And the issues you mentioned, most of those have some type of a budget number addressed to them, assigned to them.
Yeah.
And
No,
John,
actually,
in the second district, we believe very strongly that we ought to balance the federal budget, and the $17 trillion deficit
he
we
wants
cannot
to
pass
balance
on to our
it.
kids.
He wants to balance it on the backs of the students. Is how he wants
that
to
is
balance.
not true.
Well, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. But I want to bring up. We're going to get to the students in a minute. But first, let me, because you mentioned me from being from California. All right, I have a stake in what happens to John Kline because John Kline wants to open up California beaches to drilling. That involves me. So I have every right to come here and talk about John Kline. Also, John Kline's top 5 contributors are all from out of state. So if it's about being from in-state, I don't think you should be mentioning that. His biggest campaign contributors are for-profit colleges, which are not from Minnesota, and coal mining, which is not done here in the 2nd District of Minnesota. Why doesn't he take money from people right here? Why does it all come from people who are out of state?
It all come? Did you say it all comes? That's wrong.
I said
gave him $100, so I don't think it all came.
Not all.
And you're
but
getting your
not all,
$100
no.
worth. I mean, like
Well-
I'm just saying, I do think the people at this district are getting what they're paying for in the sense that the people who are paying for John Kline are getting their money's worth. The people here who voted for him but didn't give him very much money he's just getting their votes and not giving back anything in return.
Let's move on to. Let's talk about this environmental record of his, what I call the breathers. He has voted against allowing the Pentagon to even study climate change. He's for blocking federal oversight of fracking. He's for prohibiting the EPA from regulating greenhouse gases. I thought that was their job. Prohibiting the EPA from regulating water quality standards. Against any limits on CO2 pollution. Against tax credits for renewable energy. Against issuing water quality standards. For relaxing coal mining regulations. For preventing the EPA from managing Superfund sites. Again, their job. Against requiring companies to disclose toxic chemicals in drinking water. What does he have against breathing?
I mean, that record in Minnesota in particular is an affront to the fact that we have so many natural resources here that are so important to our livelihoods, from tourism to just basic, agricultural standards. And, we have the Mississippi River running through the state of Minnesota, and ignoring the facts and the studies of climate change. It's just a remarkable turn in humanity, but it's also out of step with what we need as human beings.
Well, one of his big contributors is Murray Energy. They're one of the biggest coal producers in the country. But again, they're not in this state. But they give Mr. Kline a lot of money, and he protects them. That doesn't seem like the way the Founding Fathers wanted our government to work. And I mean, how do you defend this environmental record?
Investing in research is good, and I'm all for investing in accurate, legitimate science. But the problem is that it has not failed the test of an audit. There is a group of...
Are you really serious
Yes,
now?
I am 100% serious. There is a group called the Non-Governmental International Panel on Climate Change. This is a group of scientists that are from over 14 different countries. They are unaffiliated with any government or political party, which is why I like them. And they actually fact-checked all of this UN-sanctioned science and found that there is no evidence of human-induced global warming.
So I Googled this report.
I don't know where in your ass you're pulling this out of. Somebody did a study of, in the last 10 years, 8,158 peer-reviewed studies on climate change. All but 2 of over 8,000 agreed climate change was real and man-made.
A lot of these scientists, though, are funded by the government bill. They are.
Do you know how ridiculous these talking points sound in the year 2014? We debunked this in what year? 1996?
We debunked it, Mr. Mayor, when we changed
Maher.
it from Maher. Very honestly, if you were from the 2nd District of Minnesota, most of the MAHERs in the
That's
2nd
true.
District are mayors, correct?
That's right.
So I apologize for
No,
the
no, I
mistake.
was kidding you.
Okay.
I was kidding you,
I
Steph.
hope you were kidding my friend here too about
No,
the
no,
cut.
that I wasn't kidding about.
Well, Mr. Maher, we don't treat women like that in the 2nd District of Minnesota.
Oh, we'll get to how he treats women.
I think when you take a look at these issues, we have all sorts of regulation that goes on in the United States right now, and it's not smart regulation. Now, people aren't against regulation, but they're against over-regulation, and regulation that comes in a burdensome way that doesn't give you the answer that you need. If you take a look at the Keystone XL, the Polymet mine up in northern Minnesota, they've been under review for over 6 years. They've spent over $200 million, and they don't have an answer. Now, that's not effective, that's not efficient, that's not right, and we should be able to get those folks an answer. But when we pivot back off of that, we need to take a look and address these issues. This isn't about whether or not we need...
But climate change
We need
is
so-
a
no, no, no,
question
I-
that there is a definitive answer about it.
And I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm saying is that we need to look for solutions. Now, that means that everything has to be on the table, whether it's clean coal that Barack Obama championed in 2010 for the new carbon capture technology
No
that's
such
coming
thing, but okay.
Now, nuclear
There's
reactors.
no such thing as clean coal. It's just too...
It would be fine if wind and solar were up to speed, and if solar didn't have its back pocket in Eric Schmidt's, Eric Schmidt has got a $1.6 billion stimulus loan to build a huge solar panel project out in the California-Nevada
Sure.
border. And he also took 4,000 acres of public land to build this solar project. Well, the benefits, legitimate benefits of solar are that it's clean and that it provides baseload energy. But I don't think a billionaire like Google's CEO should have to get taxpayer dollars and take 4,000 acres of public land and move a desert toward us in order to do that. He should do that by himself. That's the problem.
But if we want to talk
corporatism.
but if we want to talk about billionaires and corporations getting tax credits, maybe we should talk about the subsidization of the oil industry, which is one of the
They don't claim to be earth-friendly technology.
What's the one we should
Well,
And
that's
they are not
exactly
earth-friendly.
I mean, but that's
So why-
exactly the point. It's
Mayor, is
not
it
earth-friendly
Solandra
technology.
we're supposed to talk about? What are we supposed to talk about?
Look,
Huh?
Too much,
Let's
too much,
when
be
it
fair.
comes down,
Let's
when
be
it-
fair.
too
when
much
it comes
Fox
down-
News there, Steve.
No.
Too much Fox News. Solandra,
I'm just trying to be fair.
And it's Solandra.
Fairness is important in any discussion.
It is.
And that's why I brought it up.
So-
If she's
okay.
going to
Okay.
talk about billionaires getting subsidies, we should talk about the biggest picture of who's
Okay.
getting the
They also
subsidies
pay
and what
so much
impact
in
it has on the
taxes,
earth.
too.
Okay, and-
I know the business leaders in my city are actively taking a look at these issues because we all know we have to plan for them in the future. I don't have, I'm a mayor of a city. I have to think very pragmatically, very practically on the ground about what we're going to be doing, what kind of, water management are we going to need in my city, knowing that it's going to be wetter and drier and hotter and colder increasingly in the years to come. And if we set ourselves up for it now, maybe we can manage it at the same time as we're trying to prevent it from getting any worse.
What about this one against requiring companies to disclose toxic chemicals in drinking water? What possible reason
I
could
can't imagine what the vote was. Maybe you can tell us what the vote was.
it was against
I don't know
requiring
about that
companies to disclose toxic chemicals in drinking water?
I actually happened to look at a
I'm
couple of
sure
the wording on these, and it really is literally to outlaw the EPA from doing this stuff. Like it is like that is the wording, especially on the one about regulating greenhouse gases. It is to legally prevent the Environmental Protection Agency from being able to enforce laws
That
that
was
have to do.
really smart because the EPA, according to an internal government probe in 2011, it was proved that the EPA fudged data to get these co-regulations passed. So if you're fudging data, you should not be in
Let's talk about
charge.
fudging data for a second, because I'm going to talk about that
yeah.
panel that you cited. That was you talked about. Had some scientists in it from whatever. How many countries?
There's
More
at
than
least
14.
14.
More than 14. All right, and 35 scientists. And it was called, it's funny, it's called the Non-Governmental International Panel on Climate Change, which is like one word away from the International Panel on Climate Change, which is it's like the,
That's intentional.
Yes, it's intentional. Sort of like the way that Target likes to make its brands look a lot like the real brand. But
Like the stuff at the dollar store?
yeah, like the Oleos, not Oreos, you know.
Poopsie Cola.
But so the real climate change panel had 500 scientists on it that were not paid anything. Unlike this panel, which was sponsored by the Heartland Institute, who actually, there was a leak of documents from the Heartland Institute that showed that they were actually fundraising off of this report.
Well, here's the thing, science isn't democratic. It can take one scientist to disprove everyone else.
But scientists, first of all, the scientists aren't in it for the money.
The truth is not democratic, which means it takes one truth to outlay a lot of lies.
Well, I agree
And
with
also,
you
there's
on
something
that.
called scientific consensus. There will always be one or two. This is, you know, the theory of evolution. Do you believe in it?
I believe yes, I believe that there is some evolution.
Some evolution.
Within the context of creation.
It's on a case-by-case basis. Well, evolution is a fact, but when it was proposed by Darwin, it took 50 years because in the scientific method, scientists challenged it. They wanted to see if it was real. They didn't believe it right away. People wrote papers for and against. After 50 years, scientists agreed, yes, we've tried to disprove this. It hasn't been disproved. Darwin was right. Evolution is real. And then they moved on to other subjects. This is the state we are in with climate change. It's not a matter of debate among scientists. Only on Fox News is it a matter of debate. Among scientists, we have reached a consensus the same way we did with evolution, and it is time to move on.
But billionaire Tom Steyer, who I know that you have interviewed as well,
Sure.
he has these ads where he's talking about climate change, and he has admitted to Time magazine, I don't care about the facts as much as pushing our culture in the direction of embracing these principles and being more earth-friendly. Well, we can be more earth-friendly without believing in a myth.
The myth being climate change?
Yes, the myth being that humans cause dangerous climate change.
Well, where do you think the carbon goes? I mean, this is basic science, that the Earth just cannot absorb this much carbon. You know what carbon is, right?
I do. I also know that you're against Keystone XL, and
Because that's putting more carbon in the atmosphere.
Actually, that's incorrect. According to Time magazine, which is not exactly a conservative magazine, you release more emissions into the air via transporting crude via rail, which we are doing now, than via pipeline. And that's according to Time.
Yes, there are worse ways of doing it than what's in the ground now. You're right. That doesn't mean we should release the carbon that's in the ground now. The point about fracking is that all that carbon that is in the ground now that you want to put in the air from fracking, that's game over for the planet. You just...
That's why we should build Keystone XL so we're not releasing so many emissions into the air in the first place. At any moment, we could have a derailment that will kill children.
The answer is...
Sorry.
47 people died in Quebec, Canada.
child could
The
die.
last oil spill was right outside of a children's museum in Lynchburg, Virginia. That's what I'm referring to.
Okay.
It's remarkable.
Well,
It's remarkable that this is even a conversation we
it
need
is
to have.
remarkable.
Yeah, no, I mean,
It is remarkable.
how come there are never arguments from conservatives against things like quantum mechanics or microbiology? It always has to be some like industrial pollution where there's a commercial interest in
Because they don't get,
turning things around.
because I believe I can answer that. Because they don't get campaign contributions from quantum mechanics.
Exactly.
I don't think in Minnesota, Mr. Maher, we want to go down the road of talking about where campaign contributions come from. When we look at a Governor Dayton running for re-election and where he gets his money.
We're not here to flip him.
So So
This is all about John Kline.
campaign contributions are only considered from one source, not
No,
from
no,
all
I just-
sources.
I don't-
Not from Senator Franken, who gets all his money from outside Minnesota either.
If you want to have a Flip Franken thing, I'll come in and be
Okay.
on the panel. This is
No,
not.
you won't do it because he's a liberal. You won't do that, Mr. Maher.
Well, I do like Al Franken, yes.
Okay, well, that's one. We're one of
But,
one.
this panel tonight is just about John Kline's voting record. There may be other corrupt politicians in this state.
Well, wait now. Mr. Kline is not corrupt.
Well,
Don't say that. Oh, absolutely not.
He takes money from
Name-
places,
Mr.
mostly
Maher.
from places out of state that have nothing to do with the needs of the people in the state, and then does their bidding in Congress.
Mr.
That
Maher.
is corrupt
Mr.
to me.
Maher, corrupt. Name me. Mr. Maher, out of all fairness, when you call somebody corrupt, you better back it up.
I just did.
So, Mr. Maher, has Congressman Kline ever been charged with a campaign ethics violation?
No, that's not
Okay,
the point.
well, how do you get
Because
corrupt with that?
the scandal in this country is what's legal,
Yeah.
not what's illegal. I'm not saying. I did not say he was guilty of illegality. I said he was
What's
guilty
corrupt
of
mean?
corruption. Corrupt means when you take money from people and corporations, mostly corporations, and do their bidding instead of the bidding of the people.
Or unions or SEIU or any of those
Yes.
groups as well?
I am not saying that he is the only corrupt person in Congress.
Well,
He's
they're
the
all
one we're
corrupt
trying
then
to
under your
flip
definition. Under your definition,
To
they're all corrupt.
to a degree they are. Yes. To a degree they are. He's just the worst.
No. That is totally unfair. Totally unfair.
Let's take this other major contributor he has, which is the for-profit college industry.
Proprietary colleges.
Proprietary colleges. Okay, he has voted against considering the Student Loan Forgiveness Act. He has voted to raise rates on student loans to pay down the deficit, raise them from 3.4 to 5.9%. Takes more money from for-profit colleges than any member of Congress, and as chairman of the Education Committee, has quashed any attempts to regulate them. Why do they need to be regulated? Well, for example, his biggest contributor, the University of Phoenix, the online scam school, has a graduation rate of 12%. 88% of the people there don't graduate. That seems to me that would cry out for some regulation.
But the huge issue with education in this country is that it's the #1 determinant for your life expectancy. That it correlates, income and education correlate almost entirely with how long you're expected to live.
And how well.
And how well that you
While
will
you're
live.
alive.
And how well you are expected to live while you're alive. It's like the Republican American dream is, remain poor and die young.
That is.
I think we have a new campaign slogan. Remain poor and die young.
It works in Minneapolis. It doesn't work in Kenya.
But what I
Now, let's.
I didn't know what that meant. What did that mean?
What that means is we're in the 2nd district. We're not in Minneapolis, Mayor. We're not there. Now let's be fair about
there's a study that was done, and I can give
to
you
your
the site.
slogan, Mayor.
There's a study that's been done of every single county in the United States and what the life expectancy is of those people in every single county in the United States. And when you control for income and when you control for education, all the other differences disappear. All the other differences disappear. It's the #1, and it's certainly the one we can change most. Education is the #1 determinant of your life expectancy.
There's no argument. There's no argument there. It was your slogan that there was an argument on. That was what was ridiculous and inappropriate, Mayor.
But if you're talking about what votes are taken and what investments are made and what policies are put forth and the impact that they have on people's livelihoods and their life expectancy, if you're against increasing availability of health care, if you are against helping kids who need an education and then helping people who have student loan debt, which I'm sure you want to bring up at some point, which is enormous, If you're against raising the minimum wage, if you are against protections for workers, if you're against unionization, all of these are things that point to remain poor and die young.
He created the world's most valuable company, and I'm pretty
back to
sure
him.
he was very hot and he was very rich, and so we don't have to discuss.
And he died young.
But anecdotal information is different than anecdotal information can always, if we took it seriously, it could disprove a theory, right? There's always an outlier, there's always an exception. I was trained as a sociologist. I think in big categories, and that's what the data tells me.
Well, here's
Mr.
some
Maher?
data too.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. We could lower the interest rate down to 0, and we would still be having this discussion. Because 4 out of 5 seniors who graduate from college are not able to tee themselves up for a job. If you can't get a job when you graduate, your student debt is going to be much more of a problem. So, it's interesting that...
Well, first of all, what are seniors doing still in college? That's ridiculous.
College seniors.
Oh, college seniors.
Excuse me, that's my mistake, but... John F. Kennedy.
Say, I've heard of, the 6-year plan, but that's ridiculous.
Yeah, but you're exactly proving the
John,
point. Why can't these people get jobs? Because they're going to these crappy diploma mill colleges that are supporting people like John Kline.
Here's why.
Exactly what
John F. Kennedy was a
these
Democrat,
schools
and
have
he
to be
inherited
regulated.
a bad economy, just like Barack Obama claims to have inherited a bad economy.
Claims?
Yes, he did inherit a bad economy.
Okay, great.
Okay, so they both inherited a bad economy. And John F. Kennedy, after initially spending a lot and against the wishes of his own advisors after the spending wasn't working, he initiated many tax cuts. He tipped his Federal Reserve to raise rates instead of keeping them artificially low. Well,
a third of the stimulus program was tax cuts.
But then
he lowered taxes for 96%
rolled out
of the
Obamacare bill, and here's the amazing thing. Between 2007 and 2013, there were only 110,000 jobs created for millennials between the ages of 22 and 34. At the same time...
Well, who was president in 2007? And when Obama took office, we were losing 750,000 jobs a month.
Yes, but...
Kennedy did not inherit an economy anything like that.
In the state of Colorado in 2012, the industry of fracking created 111,000 jobs. So that means that one industry in one state
and
in 1
serial
year
killers create jobs in morgues. It doesn't mean that we should Yes.
Could we go to the issue that you're talking about at this
Please
point?
do.
The student
loans.
And again, I only want to be fair.
I know you do. No, I know you do.
And just, people can disagree about issues, but the facts are
And by
this.
the way, if I could say something for this panel, it's not really fair for you three that the audience is against you. And I appreciate you. Give them a hand because it's really true. I have been on panels where the whole audience was against my point of view. It's not easy, so we do appreciate you.
I have a couple of friends in the front row that are not on my side. They're not on my side, but they're still friends. I can respect where they're at. I can respect to the issue at hand.
Right.
And now to be fair, and it'll just take me 10 seconds, 15. Nancy Pelosi in 2007 passed the student loan bill that artificially kept the rate at 3.4%. Her bill was 4-year cliff. It was going to double to 6.8% in 2011. She doubled the student rate loan. That was her bill. Then in 2012, election year, they came forward to Congress and decided election year, we better do something about the student loan, play the political football with it. So they artificially kept it low again at 3.4%, costing the Treasury or costing our budget deficit $6 billion. Mr. Obama, my president, your president, came forward with a needed suggestion in 2013. Says we want to do this. We want to do the student loan program so it's not a political football, so that we do it in a long-term, structurally sound basis. And John Kline led that bipartisan effort in the Senate, in the House, and with the president. The president, when he signed the bill, Who did he give credit to, Mr. Maher?
I don't know.
He gave credit to John Kline. To Chairman Kline is what he says in signing that bill that brought structure, that brought reasonableness, and brought some long-term planning to student loans. You're going down the wrong path in this issue if you study the whole issue.
The issue isn't the interest. The issue is the principle. It's how much college costs. That's the real issue.
So,
and why do colleges remain expensive? Because these awful colleges like the University of Phoenix, like Capella University, because they're not regulated, they are allowed to receive federal Stafford loans.
Yes.
We have to go in and make sure that anybody that actually receives a federal loan is a real college.
Nobody,
Right?
Matt, nobody wants a non-performing school. So there should be investigation.
How come so many of them are
But Kline has blocked any
Matt, to be very honest, to talk about the student loans, which we're talking about, John Kline has received accolades from stakeholders, from the colleges, from student associations, from Democrats. John Kline's bill, 171 House Democrats voted for the bipartisan bill. 35 Democratic senators voted for the bill. You cannot go after John Kline on this issue.
Yes,
No, you can't.
Because
his
top campaign.
The facts are against you, Mr. Maher.
Again, we're talking about actually explicitly for-profit education, which is just a horrible, horrible thing.
Oh, it says student
I'm
loans.
going to disagree with you on that issue. I'm going to disagree with you on that.
I'm sorry, it says student loans.
Right, but who takes, like, the for-profit education industry wouldn't exist without federal student loans. 90% of the students in for-profit colleges have student loans, have federal student loans. They have the lowest rates of graduation. They have the lowest rates of employment. They have the most students who are in poverty. They're going to for-profit colleges. Veterans. These for-profit colleges.
And these are his biggest campaign contributors.
These for-profit colleges have preyed upon veterans. Because they're the people who are exempted from this idea that a for-profit college should have at least 10% that doesn't come from federal student loans. They discount GI Bill beneficiaries.
If we are going to prepare our workforce, from a development standpoint for the future, and President Obama has made this. President Obama has made this his greatest, one of his greatest challenges. We need proprietary schools. We need the colleges. We need the U of M. We need Carleton. We need St. Olaf. We need them all if we're going to prepare students and kids.
Let's talk specifically about veterans who are being built out of their GI Bill educations by for-profit fly-by-night colleges. And John Kline is not standing up to
there's corruption on all sides of the aisle, and we probably need term limits, and John Kline is running for his 7th term. So there's a question there about...
So you don't think he should be reelected? We can all go home.
If we had more jobs, more millennials would be running, and we'd have some fresh blood in here. But B, we have to look at the fact that you mentioned that the government is involved. You mentioned that the government is involved, and that is good, I guess. But the fact is, if we were to get the government out...
I don't think he's saying that at all.
Matt, I'm not a supporter of term limits.
But that encourages these colleges to bloat their tuition because they know our students can get student loans.
But that's what Kline is fighting for. I think what he's trying to tell you is that the for-profit colleges, only 13% of the entire college population goes to the for-profit colleges, but they're responsible for 50% of the loans. For-profit account for 50% of loan defaults,
if
rather.
You know your students are able to
that's what makes everybody's rates go up.
Loans, though, that is what allows the colleges to bloat the overall tuition rate, rather than having it more privatized. And Barack Obama himself proposed a budget that would tie interest rates to the market.
Exactly.
And then the Republicans proposed the same thing, and then he changed his mind.
But you're aware that the government makes a huge profit on student loans.
Yes, $50 billion.
$50 billion, okay.
Right.
John Kline wants to pay down our deficit with that money from students. It seems like there are so many better places we could find that money. But again, he wants to get rid of the estate tax. He wants to get rid of everything that would make the rich people pay.
Well, let's talk about the estate tax really quickly, because I know that you're not from the second and don't know it that well. You thought it was kind of suburbs of Minneapolis, but there's a huge agricultural market in the 2nd District. That estate tax hits those family farms incredibly hard, to the point where we're seeing farms that are having to leave families that it's been in for generations because they can't afford to pay the estate tax in this economy right now. That's not just something that impacts billionaires and millionaires. This is something that affects small farmers. which happen to be a big part of this district.
Any college should be held accountable for its performance, proprietary or not. Any college should. But when it gets to the issue of the student loan, when it gets to the issue at hand that Mr. Maher brought up, that the student loan bill that passed in 2000, was it this year, 14? Or was it, maybe it was 13. John Kline led the bipartisan effort. John Kline got the accolades from the president.
All right. We've gone over these facts. Let's move on to another.
Matt is not accepting it.
Okay.
If a school has a 12% graduation rate,
Matt, we've gone through that. We've gone by that.
Loan?
They should be held accountable.
Right.
Matt,
we're going around in circles. I'm going to go to our last issue, which is about women mostly, but also let's throw in same-sex in this. He is for, John Kline, for defunding Planned Parenthood. He has a 0% voter rating from Planned Parenthood. By the way, he has 0% rating from the environmental raters also, and Michelle Bachmann, who doesn't think carbon is harmful, has an 11. Those are true facts. Voted to make abortion illegal after 20 weeks and make doctors who perform them eligible for up to 5 years in prison. Co-sponsored a bill exempting forcible rape, but not rape, from a ban on federal funding of abortion. So, again, that member Todd Aiken, legitimate rape, he's another person who apparently wants to make distinctions about rape. Against the Equal Pay for Women Act, against the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, against prohibiting job discrimination based on sexual orientation, for the Defense of Marriage Act, that's against, obviously, gay marriage, and against the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the military. Is this in step with the voters here?
No. Yes.
It's David sticking by his man, John Kline. He don't care what you all think. He fucking is in step, all right? I don't care what you people say.
That's not true. You respect that there's differences of opinion.
Yes.
And there are. You got to respect that. You understand that there's going to be differences of value. You understand that there's differences of principles. I understand
Absolutely.
that. But the strength of democracy, this only strength of our country, our republic, is that people will come together and they'll compromise. And that's the only strength we have. If we don't do that,
we've lost
well, then we've lost the country, because a republic cannot survive unless there's a willingness to cooperate and compromise. Well, now, I don't know.
We've lost that.
The question is whether the government is the best answer, the best solution for these problems. Does the government help us become more equal? I think Thomas Jefferson would tell us, you don't need the federal government
I would think the slaves would say
you don't need the federal government to sanction your most intimate personal relationships. And we made a mistake long ago of involving the federal government in heterosexual marriage. We should get the federal government out of all marriage. There should not be any federal involvement in that at all.
And that would allow anyone who wanted to get married to get married.
Yes.
I agree, including gay people.
And at the same time, though,
So you're for gay marriage?
I am for, yes, states and individuals deciding that, just no federal.
Why? What's the difference between Utah and Massachusetts if two people want to get married? Why people get married differently in Utah?
I guess my question is, what's the government have to gain from
recent
giving us different tax rates depending on whether or not you're married or not? Why is the government involved in marriage in the first place?
I couldn't agree more.
Here's the odd thing, but you do
But
want
I've never been
involved
married.
in the abortion issue, right?
Right or wrong?
No, that should be a decision between a woman and her doctor.
Yeah.
That's Roe versus Wade. I grew up in that world. That's the world that I live in. But the reality is that that's not what people in this district are talking about right now.
Yeah,
when you take a look around, people are worried about whether or not they can get that job that's a little bit better, whether or not they can get their kids to go to college.
Maybe you're not talking for sexually active people who don't want their doctor to go to jail for performing an abortion. Maybe some people are talking about this.
In some ways, though, what you just said speaks directly to this issue, because women, too, want to say, I want to get the next best job. I want to make sure that I can move forward, and I want to make sure when I get there, discrimination doesn't happen in a way that either makes me leave the job because I see myself with fewer options, or I don't get paid the same amount on that job, or that my options are curtailed.
And women should absolutely be paid the same for the same work, as they should be.
Without pay.
It's been the law since
But
1963.
it seems like we found an area where the right part of the panel is really not with John Kline
No,
on these
no,
things.
that's not true.
But you just said you're for the Fair Pay Act, you're for gay marriage, and you're for abortion.
Well,
It seems like
let's look at the common ground there, though. Let's look at the common. You got to find some common ground.
Okay.
You got to find people coming together.
Let's find it.
Right or wrong, and I understand many disagree. I respect that.
Okay.
But this issue, both of them, have been decided on the ballot box in referendums. In Minnesota, in 2012, the issue went down. In California, I think in 2008 or 10, it
Correct.
passed. It passed, if I remember correctly.
We're talking about gay marriage?
Yes.
No, it went down in 2008.
It went down, allowing it. That's
Allowing
correct.
it, yes.
Here it went down, that was prohibiting it. Wasn't it in 2012, wasn't it the ballot
Yes.
amendment?
It was an effort to
We were
prohibit
the
it.
first. We were the first state in
Okay,
the country.
yeah, but
that's the fact. It's in 2012.
we're just talking about whether
the
John
ballot amendment-
Kline is in
But let's
step.
get
One
back
area
to
where
the
he's
equal
right.
pay for equal work.
Yeah, that's.
That's been the law since 1963. Did anybody try to repeal the Equal Pay Act of 1963?
I'm absolutely opposed to all laws that try to say that women need the legislation to help us in the workplace. That's absolutely untrue. Because, first of all, as a millennial, there is a new Pew poll out that just came out December 2013 that said that
Pay equity is the law.
I don't
That
need
is the law right now.
legislation to solve this problem, is what I'm saying. Because
But why are women paid less then?
let me just explain it. We'll
Even
take
if-
a few
let's ask
seconds.
the Obama
The latest
administration.
Pew poll found that
Even if we grant you that point, which I don't, even if I grant you that point, that in this day and age millennials don't need legislation, the only reason you don't need legislation, which I don't agree with, is because there was legislation.
No, that's absolutely false.
Let's give Katie the floor here.
We are at near parity with men, and so there's a very small gap. But to close that gap, here's what needs to happen: women needs to stop being bitchs to each other. And there's a lot of research
I will
out
not
there.
stand for profanity. I will not stand.
I stand with you.
But there's
I will not
research.
stand for spelling out
There's
bad words.
research to back that up.
Or
You know,
saying.
Time just came up with a study that showed that women in the workplace and business negotiations blatantly lie to other women. And also, women are far more likely to promote and mentor young male associates
Yeah,
than men.
I did read that too.
I've
Yeah,
actually
they're-
seen the same studies.
That
I
would
just wanna
close that
point out
small
that-
gap.
That those differences disappear the more women there are in a workplace.
Yes.
In a situation where a woman is the only senior partner or the only senior in a hiring situation, she will gravitate towards hiring men and not women. If you put more women in that senior hiring position, they will be more likely to hire women.
We
If
have
there
a
are
lot more
women
women in the
to
workplace,
mentor-
though, and these studies are
Okay.
still
Not
showing.
enough.
We're running out
Not
of time.
enough.
I have one last question I want to ask about the subject we're talking about, which is Congressman Kline, which is why doesn't he appear? The biggest surprise, I said on our show last week, was we thought when it came to October, which is the last month before the campaign season, we thought he'd be somewhere every day. I mean, when guys run for president, they're out there on the hustings 18 hours a day. He hasn't appeared in public since August 17th. There's
Actually
no
not true.
debate.
That's not true.
There's no
It's
over the weekend.
firefighters right now tonight. This is firefighters month, isn't it? I think he's with firefighters right now tonight.
We can't find him. We've tried to have people go to find him, to ask a question, to present some of these facts to him, some of these issues, say, what is your position on this? Why do you back this? Why do you say this? He's not around. It's like he's in the witness protection program. I mean, I would think that this would seem to be insulting to the voters of this district, that his strategy to win is just to hide, not to remind anybody that there is an election. Why no debates? Why no town halls? Why no appearances? Where's John Kline?
I didn't know, Bill,
point.
Mr. Maher, if you were talking about John Kline or Al Franken or Mark Dayton. I didn't know which one, because they
Again.
also have refused from prime time debates.
That may be the case. I don't know.
Okay, and
I
it
don't
is
know.
the case. It is the case. I know that to be the
But
case.
that doesn't really defend John Kline. Why doesn't John Kline appear? And I think those other guys probably do. But okay.
They appear, but not at prime time.
Not prime time. What is
7 o'clock at night with
So
the
let
TV
me-
cameras on.
If I can
No, but they're
unpackage your
accessible
claim
to
really
people.
quickly.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Joe.
So, first of all, your claim that he hasn't had a public event is just simply not true. There was actually a story today in the Star Tribune, our largest newspaper in the state. They happened to find him. Do you guys might be able to?
Well, they don't make it easy, I'll tell you that.
The district, but they didn't seem to have any trouble finding him. They ran a profile. They said, here he was. He was hanging out at an event. He was accessible. He didn't go and force himself into conversations, but he was there. He was accessible. He's always been accessible. To your point about debates.
No town halls, no debates.
He's with the firefighters
To your
tonight.
point about the
With,
debates, there's a debate on
Clover being
October
firefighters
31st.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll get out.
Can't he be with firefighters are good guys.
You seem to
good ladies.
Can I
They're
call?
good ladies? Good guys.
Well, next time we can't find him, can I call you?
You sure may.
Because it seems like, when they want to find Superman, they got to go through Clark Kent. That's what I feel like. I have to call Steve. We have to get a hold of John Kline. No one can find him. Can we put you on the speed dial? All right. Well, listen, again, thank you guys for doing this. I know this was not an easy gig for you. How about a hand for the right side?